Okay, Mr. Dormammu man.
Dormammu.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Decoding TV's review of Ironheart Season 1, Episodes 4 through 6. I'm David Chen. Joining me, I am so pleased to introduce our guest today. He is the co-host of the Amazing Spider Talk podcast. You can also read his recaps and reviews on the free decodingtv.com newsletter. Be sure to subscribe. Dan Gvozden, welcome back to Decoding TV.
I'm so thrilled to be here. I mean, it wouldn't be a controversial Marvel show if you and I weren't talking.
Indeed, Dan. So great to have you back on Decoding TV. What we're going to do here is discuss our overall thoughts on Ironheart episodes 4 through 6, and then dive into some spoiler-filled details pretty quickly. So just be aware, like, you should probably have watched Ironheart or not care about the spoilers before you listen to this conversation. So let's get into it. And again, I do want to just shout out, be sure to read Dan's excellent recaps over at the decodingtv.com newsletter. He has full detailed analysis of both Ironheart as well as an amazing series he did on Andor. So again, check it out, decodingtv.com. Dan Gvozden, what did you think overall of Ironheart?
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed listening to your discussion with Patrick Klepek for the first 3 episodes. And I found myself laughing all throughout because while I think that I like this show more than the average person, I do agree with a lot of the criticisms that you guys laid at its feet and the sort of absurdities about how it treats like corporate management and ownership and things like that. And maybe I find myself grading on a very harsh curb here because I really have not liked most of Marvel's television offerings. I mean, there's like the rare kind of like most of WandaVision or Loki that I found kind of just genuinely enjoyable on their own. You and I covered Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which we kind of like have an inside joke about with the sort of boat and all of that stuff. But this one, I feel like I've had to make less caveats about my enjoyment of it. I think it kind of dips into some of the like YA storytelling tropes that I find kind of annoying in stuff like this. But I think its sort of heart is in the right place. And I think it knows what it wants to be, which is not anything like sort of elevated, which is to say, I just got done reviewing Andor for you guys, and I wouldn't talk about these shows in the same like sentence as each other, which I guess I'm doing right now.
You just did it. You just did it. But
Yeah. I, I I think it's not aiming for that, and I think what it is doing is kind of like replicating the sort of like looseness of comic books, but I think its focus on like most of its main characters is pretty solid, and it's not trying to do too much. And by the end of these final 3 episodes, I felt like most of the stuff that I cared about was largely wrapped up. Maybe not entirely satisfyingly enough to conclude a whole season and feel like I got the entire story, but enough for me to think like this is a solid entry in Marvel television, and that I wish that their other works all the way back to Netflix were this kind of contained in like whether it's the 6 episodes or the sort of smaller scope of this. That I ended up walking away with it having had a pretty decent time.
I didn't hate it. I don't think it's terrible, but it has a lot of potential that it ultimately does not live up to. Right? I think is the issue. It's I would describe Ironheart as the bottom of the middle in terms
Okay.
of Marvel shows. Right? It's not in the bottom of the bottom. Right? Like the Secret Invasion is pretty bad. I would say
Yeah.
Falcon and Winter Soldier is pretty bad. She-Hulk, I would argue, is pretty, and then there's like middle tier, and then there's like, the better. I mean, there's not that many shows. It's only like
Yeah.
eight shows or whatever. But
I would put this like right there with like Hawkeye. Like there's a kind of like sort of distinct visual style. It's like got a like pretty contained core cast of characters, and it kind of knows the story that's at the heart of what it wants to tell, and gives the characters like it knows what their arc is and just kind of keeps it contained to that. Whereas like Secret Invasion to me was like, hey, let's try to punch way above our weight here, and fail spectacularly at that. Yeah.
The thing about Ironheart is there's several really strong things about it. First of all, in my opinion, this is one of the not only best looking MCU shows, best looking MCU things that has ever been made. Like, I would put this up there with like MCU movies in terms of how good it looks, just the color palette, the visuals. I think the way the Ironheart suit has been realized looks really cool throughout the entire show. So there's like some good things about it. I also think it has a lot of great ideas. I love some of the ideas it's dealing with, making a metaphorical, perhaps literal deal with the devil. The idea of, and we'll talk about this in a moment, the sort of thing that we think of as the superhero's strength being a way to a response to that person's trauma. Like, I like that as a
Yeah.
concept. AI as a part of our lives and using AI to recreate people that we love. Like, there's all these cool things that the show just does not address or deal with in any meaningful way at all. Another idea, like taking control of a guy using cybernetic implants. So many cool concepts of the show, and then just none of it is explored in any meaningful way. So the show is just throwing interesting idea, and then like it's over by the time the ideas are all introduced. Literally, a major character is introduced in the final episode, right? And it's like, okay, well, that's it, right? That's the end of the show, and we don't know if we're going to get any more. So that's ultimately a disappointment. Is it has the ingredients of a great show, it has some great ideas. It tries to do too much. Its reach exceeds its grasp, and as a result, the show ends up being a little bit disappointing. But certainly not a disaster. Certainly overall a fairly enjoyable, breezy watch. Just nothing that is gonna leave any kind of lasting memory, in my opinion.
Sure. And
Um,
I think you kind of put your finger right on it. I think for me, the biggest shortcomings are in regards to its like understanding of tech, and sort of like the
and
morality.
business and finance.
Sure, but like anything that I would think is like maybe like slightly above the grade of like a YA novel, it really doesn't really know how to handle with the sort of like modern adult touch. and
Yeah.
and some of it I almost wonder if, like, this was announced 5 years ago, and the world in terms of like AI and the morality of all that stuff has really changed a lot in that time. To it, like, I mean, obviously these concepts have been explored by sci-fi, since time immemorium,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
this,
there's like bringing back someone you love is a Black Mirror season 2
yeah,
plotline via AI, right? Black Mirror season 2 plotline, and that came out in what 2013. So that was 12 years ago, right? So
100%. But I would consider that like an adult like, entertainment product. I mean, it certainly I would show
yeah,
it to teenagers, but I think it's more adult in its very nature. And I think this sort of like offhand conversations that maybe you and I might have about like AI and the morality of like using certain technologies haven't really become sort of a like part of the common vernacular until like the past couple of years. And I wonder how much this show maybe played it conservatively on that stuff, just because it predates the sort of like day-to-day speak of AI that we have today. I don't mean to give it a sort of way to like write it off, but it does play very safely with tech and its discussion of tech. And for a show that is ostensibly an Iron Man show, that's the part where I think it's weakest.
all right, Dan. Why don't we talk about some of the stuff that actually happened in these final 3 episodes? So let's talk about some of the major plot points. We're not going to go beat by beat, although we'll talk about some major sequences as they come to mind. But I want to talk about some of the major plot and character developments. Let's start with Riri's meltdown. At one point, while trying to analyze the cape that she took from Parker, she has a panic attack and needs to process her fear of her family getting hurt. And the whole thing with the cape is very silly because for a couple reasons, right? The whole point is she's trying to figure out how she can destroy the cape, right? So she cuts a piece of the cape off, and as you point out in the recap or in your group recap notes, hasn't she already figured out a way to stop the cape if she has a laser that can cut the cape? But
Yeah.
let's not even think about that. Uh, then she tries to do all these experiments on it, which is like a fun montage of her trying to figure out how to destroy the cape. But then at the end, I don't think she even does any of that, if I recall correctly. Like she just takes the cape from Parker,
Yeah.
and that's it. Like I don't think there's a big deal made of like disposing of the cape. If I don't recall that, but let me know if you saw that, Dan.
I would say the distinction there is that like in this moment she's thinking about how she can destroy the cape, that and yet when she takes it from Parker, it's like a way she wants the cape at that point to use for
Yeah.
her own benefit. So like maybe it's like picking nits, but the idea by the end when she takes it is not I'm going to destroy it. It's I need to utilize this for my own purposes,
Yeah.
and so it's a shift in attitude from her.
Let's talk about the cape briefly. To me, this never looked good. And like the physical prop slash costume itself never looked good. And I was kind of surprised how much time the show devoted to saying that it looked terrible. Like every character goes up to Parker and says, "You look awful." And I'm thinking to myself, I agree, but it's weird that you're pointing that out, show. You know what I mean? That was strange to me. What did you think of how the cape physically looked, Dan?
I'm fine with the cape looking awful. It's that the show is trying to convince us of two simultaneous things, that the cape
Yeah.
looks awful and that we should be scared of it. Right. So like there's ominously lit rooms with the cape in it with lights flashing, and it's like, oh no, demon cape. And like to that point, like we should be fearful of the cape, even though it looks kind of shit. And I don't think it ever sells be scared of the cape or even be scared of what the cape can do.
Yeah.
There's a sort of like implication that like obviously that it is like corrupting Parker, and you see these like tendrils of vein looking things growing over his body. Although I think that's like needlessly complicated by like the suggestion that maybe he's also tattooing them onto his body.
Right. I think he's tattooing them so that people don't think he looks weird. That's my sense. Is that like
Okay.
he's getting like it's making his veins swell up, and then he's getting tattoos, so people are like, "Oh, it's tattoos and not an evil cape that's slowly infecting him and killing him." Is my sense.
Sure. Okay. All right. Fine. Fine. Maybe a detail I didn't necessarily need, because he doesn't seem all that worried about it once it's literally covering his face.
Usually, I am a fan of filmmakers and people making shows doing something like using practical effects instead of uh doing CG. Like they could have been a CG cape, but this is
Yeah.
one time where I felt like it kind of needed to be a CG cape, or at least a CG augmented cape, because all I'm seeing is just a guy wearing a kind of somewhat cheap and shitty looking cape.
Yeah, it
And
looks
it
like something you'd pick up at like Spirit Halloween.
right.
Like
Yeah.
it's like that light in its fabric. Like make the fabric weighted or like like velvety or
Yeah.
like you said, use CGI to give it like an unnatural wind that's blowing
Right.
through it that's not indicated by the room. Um, in the comics, and I hate to be this guy, but like
No, please be
yeah,
this guy. That's what we
in the
want.
comics, like Parker Robbins is like a super down on his luck loser, like really like if lower middle class, like upper lower class guy that's really down on his luck, and the cape kind of matches that. It's got some kind of like aura about it, but again, it's not a like very high fashion like ooh that's the devil's cape kind of thing, and yet it gives him these otherworldly powers, but the otherworldly powers are terrifying. Like
Hmm.
and you can really tell from the minute that you meet Parker Robbins that like this guy should not be able to do the things that he's doing because he's such a loser. And so it like augments him in a way that allows him to compete with like the big like gang lords, the kingpin, all the major players of New York City's kind of mafioso world that he should not be operating in. And whereas here, I feel like, okay, maybe he can like go invisible and curve bullets, which he can do in the comics too. But like, I feel like the power should have been greater in order to sell the like real advantage that he's getting from this cape. and how much he's like that trade-off is truly worth it to this character.
Well, I think here's my question for you, Dan Gvozden, is does he have a crew in the comics as he
Uh,
does in this show?
Kind of. I mean, he basically, it's not a crew in that way. He rounds up sort of like low level D-list villains, you know, like the sort of like animal themed characters that are sort of the rogues, part of people's rogues galleries, that they start the comic by just beating up in a couple of panels and then moving on. And so it's kind of this almost like revenge squad of like losers who all want to be elevated to kind of like rise above their ranks. So like thematically, it's similar to what's being done here, although they probably didn't want a bunch of people in costumes here. And so they kind of opted for sort of elevated gangster types in this.
Right.
Although how much that worked for you, I guess, like could vary. Like
I guess the problem, the reason I asked the question is because if the cape is so powerful, why does he need a crew? Like,
right.
Why? I'm James Kirk in Star Trek V asking, why does God need a starship? Right? Like, because I think in the first heist that we see, he's not even in it, right? And it's like, dude, you theoretically you are more powerful than literally every other person here. Why aren't you doing the heists, right? Like, why aren't you just doing them all yourself? It doesn't make any sense, in my opinion. And so they have this thing where they wanted to get this like very intersectional crew together, which I fully support, but also then he also has a super powerful cape, so like it just doesn't add up to me that this guy would need this crew if he himself and he, by the way, he dismisses the whole crew in like the penultimate episode. So it's like, so he didn't need them anyway, right? Like, what was the point of having the crew if he has all the powers anyway?
No, and we see him doing like a ton of like, I mean, I don't know if it's the cape that's allowing him to control Ezekiel more than it is the sort of like, let me swap out the names in the sort of tech override, which to me is another example of the tech being super lame. But like he seems to be controlling Ezekiel. Like, I mean, he makes mention that maybe it's through like his like kind of tech programming, but it seems much more a function of the cape than anything else. And so,
well, we never get the sense that he himself is technically proficient in any way. But then he is able to figure out how to like whatever. We'll get to that later. Anyway, this is a massive digression. The point I was making was Riri's meltdown. That was what I was originally talking about. And I actually really like that they gave Riri like a good motivation for wanting to build this suit. Like, she's so obsessed with building the suit, and why would you want to build the suit? And you know, externally it doesn't make sense economically as you're looking at it, and then she kind of confesses it's because I need to build this suit to protect us, because there's nothing, if I don't have the suit, I cannot protect us. And I think that's actually a really profound idea, and one of the few ideas in the show that really got to me. It really like resonated with me. Oh, this person experienced this horrifying trauma where her stepfather and friend were lost to gun violence, and it makes sense that she would want to do something to kind of defend herself and those that she loves. So that's one element of the show that I really liked, and then the show immediately undercuts it, in my opinion, because there is this scene where the suit goes and picks up her friend. Xavier goes and has a terrible reaction to Natalie in AI form. And the whole time that this is happening, I'm nodding vigorously. I'm saying, this guy is right. This is horrifying what Riri has done, and she should feel bad. And he says, you should delete this. And I'm rooting for this. I'm like, everything this guy's saying makes sense, but I think he is made to look unreasonable, or at the very least less reasonable, by the end of the show. I think we're meant to somewhat accept Riri's obsession with keeping Natalie alive, or not killing Natalie's AI through this thing. And I found that to be very disappointing, because I don't think the show really makes an argument one way or the other. I don't think the show does a good job of either defending an AI Natalie or condemning AI Natalie. It ends up in this kind of weird in between place, and that is very disappointing to me. I can respect you if you take like one position or the other, but I don't think it really does that, and this is a show that's theoretically about a woman who is really into tech, and theoretically has the show could have some things to say about the use of tech to bring back those we love from the dead. And it doesn't seem like it says anything about that, in my opinion. Dan Gvozden, what do you think about all that?
I largely agree with you, and I think I didn't quite in the moment where Xavier is kind of dressing her down about how she has sort of like abused the memory of Natalie for her own purposes, whether she intended on doing it or not. Um, I didn't feel like the show was making us side against him or making him seem unreasonable, because I was largely agreeing with him, and I felt like his points were like well articulated by him, and the show afforded him some level of grace in that. It's when like he kind of comes back and says like, I'm not going to make you get rid of her. I understand how important it is to you, and I'll have to learn to accept it. And then we don't really get anything more from that.
Right.
I got really
Yeah,
disappointed.
I agree. And then Natalie is don't ask, but when they infuse magic into the suit, like the Natalie AI goes away, and it's like we're supposed to interpret that as a very traumatizing, upsetting moment, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you how I felt was like in that moment. I mean, I guess it plays it for trauma, but um, I mean, it definitely does. I don't know if I felt traumatized myself as the audience, like I was being made to like feel like I should be upset that this is happening necessarily more than I knew it was upsetting for Riri in that moment. And what was interesting to me is the sort of like implication or outright statement that the show makes that like Natalie is a projection of Riri's brain, therefore a projection of her trauma
Mm-hmm.
made person. And so when she tries to bring her back, she can't, because she's kind of healed that trauma in some way. And so I thought, oh, that's really interesting. Like this is the part of the third act where, and as Zelma, the magic character that gets brought in here, says, um, for with magic, everything, like for each thing gained, there's something lost. And that was interesting to me, like maybe as a sort of like statement on like when you heal your trauma, you might lose some of the things that like came out of your trauma that maybe
Right.
are additions to your life. um, which then casts the kind of final decision at the end of the show, which I'm sure we're going to get to, in like a different light. It's like someone kind of like not being willing to kind of let go of their trauma or even heal themselves
Yeah.
in some way, and that then becoming manifest in a different way. And I find all of that very interesting. I just think the problem isn't even necessarily in the script more than it is in the filmmaking not choosing how to portray it for the audience, not to put like a spin on the ball to say like, you should feel bad about this. Like, obviously we don't want her to make a deal with the devil to get what she wants, but it doesn't feel quite as tragic as it could, because like, is the net result of Natalie coming back good? I don't really know. And so like to me, it just comes down on like the filmmakers not really injecting how they feel about all this stuff into it, in a way to help us figure out how we should feel about it. Because I actually kind of think it's on the page, that like it says she's healed. It's like it's basically implying that she's healed her trauma, and she needs to like move on from that in order to defeat the bad guys, and that she chooses not to, and that's really interesting. But again, I just don't think that the filmmaking itself leans into being a tragedy.
I would disagree a little bit and say that a little bit of it is on the script level. Like so many of the decisions that Riri makes during this show are not made by Riri, as I discussed a little bit in the last podcast, right?
Yeah.
The decision to make Natalie, oh, it just accidentally happened. I didn't do it. Killing what is it, Parker's cousin, right? Oh, it was an accident. Didn't mean to kill John. Like nothing that happens is Riri's actual decision. It's a very bizarre. And then by the end, we'll get to it later, but like by the end, it's like what has Riri really learned during this show? Very little. as far as I can
Yeah,
tell, right?
I agree with that. And actually, like I brought up like YA fiction early in our
Mm-hmm.
discussion here. To me, this is a real problem with a lot of YA fiction, and I would consider this YA fiction as well. Or at least that's the kind of the target audience. And it's like a lot of these like books and films and stuff are really terrified of making. At least to me, it seems they're really terrified of making their main character problematic in any way, or really kind of like making the character own their
Right.
flaws.
Yeah.
The movie that I and book series that I think about the most in this regard, and maybe because it's one of the most popular, is The Hunger Games, where
Mm-hmm.
the kind of central concept of that book and movie is you've got a bunch of teenagers forced into like the killing fields where only one of them gets to like walk away alive. And in every moment, like Katniss is never made to actually face the decision of having to kill someone. Like
Mm-hmm.
even in the book, there's a moment where she like, notches an arrow and she's scared and fires off an arrow and ends up killing someone. And the book argues its way around, oh, she did it by instinct. She wasn't like, consciously making that choice to murder someone.
Right.
And every step along the way, it removes her agency to actually take a life, because having her kill someone would be maybe too messy for that protagonist, and for someone to like find themselves like the special person to find themselves in that person. And I feel like the same is somewhat true here to some extent for Riri, that like it's treating her kind of with like kids gloves,
Yeah.
um uh, but kind of not in the end. Like it kind of dooms her in the end, which is what I found interesting about the ending.
Yeah. 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 Well, let's get to that momentarily. But first, talk about a couple of other quick things. I mean, the idea there's a lot of I would say there's a lot of contrivances in the show. Parker gives Ezekiel a choice, I guess. He says, "Hey, come work for me. You can be all you can be." And then later he reveals to Ezekiel, "Actually, you didn't have a choice after all. I've taken control of your body." And he uses Ezekiel to kind of break into his dad's house and so on. And I again, if there was less stuff going on in the show, this could have been a really cool subplot. His body is being taken over, and it's kind of a cool performance that he's doing. Um, but then it's only on screen for like less than 10 minutes, right? Like it's and then he gets defeated by Riri because she needs to kick him in the balls for him to be deactivated. But
I,
anyway,
I got to admit, I loved the kick him in the balls moment, and the acknowledgement that like it was about protecting the family jewels, so to speak, which leans also into the sort of like protecting your father's legacy,
yeah,
in some way, through like how he even could have kids. There's something like that they hint at there that I think was intentional and is kind of clever. But again, I think a lot of what you're getting at is just not like, even in the brief moments that they have with this, they don't go quite as far as they really could have in terms of the filmmaking. And maybe I'm asking too much out of a TV show, but probably had less time to shoot this and more to do. But like, you're right. Alden Ehrenreich is there to have fun, and he's really doing as much as he can with this. But I don't feel like the filmmakers are like interested in making these moments any bigger than they are, like in the show.
kind of random that Parker can just take over his cybernetic implants, whatever. Let's look past that. And just it's a cool concept of, oh, like my body is suddenly being controlled by someone else. That's like horrifying and interesting, and it's not in the show for very long, right? Is kind of what I'm saying, because the show has all these other things that it wants to try to do. Parker has daddy issues. Also, he's made a deal with the devil, and he's not. None of these are even the main character, by the way, which is Riri. So it's just like there's just so much stuff going on that I don't think is, again, fully explored. So anyway,
I
Riri.
mean, I'll push back just a tiny little bit. It's like I'm kind of okay with them yada yadaing some of this. Like, there's enough ideas that like they do something with that. I don't need the movie to or the show to suddenly like derail itself into that territory, and I'm okay with a sort of lighter touch. I feel like comics are kind of like that, where it's like, here's like 50 high concept ideas mishmatched into here. I think, again, for me, it all comes down to like presentation, which is like, you did this really cool idea, like maybe lean your filmmaking more into it.
Let's talk a little bit about the final sequences slash fight scene, right? So Riri gathers together her friends and family to assemble a final version of the Ironheart suit that she uses to take the hood and cape back from Parker and defeat him once and for all. She doesn't have an arc reactor, Dan Gvozden, so she needs to use magic instead. Uh, Kind of a cool concept. Again, very yada yada yada, as you said. What did you think of the use of magic as part of the Ironheart suit? I think, by the way, the suit looks awesome.
Yeah.
The design is cool. The way it shows up in the show looks great. Like, it just, like, every time the suit's on screen, I'm like, that is really cool. And it reminded me of how I felt when I'm watching the original Iron Man. I'm like, oh wow, that's like badass. So I like the suit design. What did you think of the magic, Dan, and kind of how that was integrated here?
Well, really quick about the suit. Another thing I really appreciated about it is that it's visually distinct from Iron Man.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like Iron Man 2. Like, it's not shiny metal, it feels much more of like, like, I don't know if plastic is the way, or fiberglass
More
is the way to go.
DIY, certainly, in many ways, right?
Yeah, and it's like the non-glossy Iron Man, if you will. It's matte Iron Man. So I like that a lot about it, and the colors are nice and bold and vibrant. I think it's silly that her mom just suddenly is like, I bought the old car, and this is going to be enough for us to build this, because like, a lot of these heists, could have been solved by just going and buying a car, but okay. Yeah, the magic thing I think is another really cool idea, but I don't know like what it gains. So like, Zelma is a cool character from the comics, and I feel like she feels like she was kind of added in here, if only to kind of maybe like bolster their like Young Avengers like push in some way. Not that she was a member of the Young Avengers in the comics. But I also know that they were going to do like a Strange Academy show before Marvel Television was sort of overhauled, and that was put on pause. And she's a big part of that. And so she feels kind of like the sort of like insert character here for upcoming like future Marvel production. And okay, fine. They did a good enough job introducing her here. But like, we spend so much time talking about what's behind Parker's powers. It's Dormammu, or is it? Like, where is Zelma pulling this magic from? Like, is there no trade-off there?
Right. Right.
And then like, what are the powers that are gained by Riri? Like, is it a shield? Is it extra strength? I mean, like, put some words to it.
Right. It's,
Like,
as far as I can tell, it's just energy to power the suit. That's
right.
and and
Yeah.
but I agree. It's like, oh, you're tapping into unlimited source of energy with zero downside, I guess, right? It's a little bit odd.
Right. When the other side of it, when the evil side of it has been so, labored over, like that things don't come for free,
Right.
and
Not just in this show either. Like, in the rest of the MCU, we've seen many times when magic has had WandaVision specifically, right? As
yeah,
another TV show, right? That said, I think Zelma is a wonderful character, and it was really funny to hear her talk with her mom about how that school is what her reach school is, and what her safety is. The idea that
yeah.
these are schools that people study to be in. I was tickled by that. I thought that was very clever. So. But yeah, I think you're right that it's just literally there's the way they explain the suit is it's magic. The way they explain the suit is it's magic, right? So
Even beyond like the MCU rules, I made reference to this in the last piece that I wrote for you on the first 3 episodes. It's like the whole concept of like light and dark sides of magic. Like, take a look at Star Wars. Is that like the dark side is supposed to be, or the evil side is supposed to be the easy path that doesn't ask a lot from you until it suddenly does, and it takes your soul, right? And like, that's literally what is going on here. And the good path is supposed to be the harder achieved, slow path that's maybe frustratingly slow and takes a lot from you in the moment. And yet it doesn't here. It's just like a quick fix. And
right,
again, I
right,
go back to the YA thing, which is like, this is the sort of like everybody is a perfect key for every perfect lock, and like in that moment, not only do I have this like endless supply of magic I just have to ask for, but then my mom shows up with a car that, like everything about that suit is not really anything that she brought. It's the mom brought the supplies, her friend brought the magic, and I guess she brings the know-how. But then I don't even think the show has done a great job of like showcasing how Riri's smarts were either obtained. It seems almost like by genetic legacy. It even goes out of its way to like show in a flashback like her stepfather being like, stop studying your like doing your studies and come dance with me. And it's like a touching moment, but like the counter example is Tony Stark, who had a terrible relationship with his father because both of them were like tech obsessed, right? Like it shows the trade off for like, hey, if you're going to be the super genius, it means you're going to have a tortured relationship with your father because you've been groomed or whatever from a young age to be like a tech whiz, right? And like Riri gets to kind of have it all. Like she gets to be effortlessly cool and dance to cool music and have a bunch of friends and be this like super genius. Yeah.
I don't mind that at all, though. I mean,
Okay.
I don't mind that at all because it's hey, it's true for some people being extremely smart is a very difficult process, and for other people they're just geniuses and they grow up in homes with parents that love them, and that's the way it is. I will say this, Dan. Where Riri's shortcomings really come into view are with her moral decision making, right? And
Sure. Sure.
that's the maybe that's her downside, right? Is not, oh, she had a tortured upbringing or she had a tragic past or whatever. I mean, she did have a tragic past, but but it's that she doesn't know how to make good decisions.
I get that she has a tragic backstory and it has shaped her kind of like poor decision making in that she's always looking both for her own glory, but also like to protect other people. I just think that there's like a little thread missing that could tie it all together. That would really make the character, or maybe I'm just too like connected to Spider-Man and sort of like wanting all of my heroes to just be like failures on every aspect. But yeah.
All right. Well, those are some thoughts on everything that happens right up to the end of Ironheart. But Dan Gvozden, let's get to it. I mean, we've been teasing it. We got to get to it. We got to talk about the big reveal of Ironheart, which is that Mephisto is the one that's been pulling all the strings. Now, Riri very easily defeats Parker, takes the cape, and before she's able to abscond, Mephisto is right there. We also get some flashbacks where we see that Mephisto seduced Parker with promise of him being able to be self-actualized in exchange for this cape. And Mephisto is played by Sacha Baron Cohen, and he explains his whole deal, which is that he makes these kind of bargains with all these people around the world and heads of state and popes and things like that. And he says, I'll give you this in exchange for your soul, basically, right? Like, I don't exactly know what he's getting out of it.
I mean, it's implied, right? Something you
Yeah,
won't miss. So he's
yeah,
going after people that he feels like already don't have like a strong like soul, right? You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, oh, you won't miss it because you're not really relying on it already.
yeah. Mephisto obviously has been the source of a great deal of speculation. A lot of people thought that Mephisto would be the main bad person, the main baddie in WandaVision. Some people also speculate he might show up in Spider-Man: No Way Home. But it has become so frequently discussed that it has kind of become an inside joke slash meme of,
Yeah.
oh, it's Mephisto. Like, is Mephisto the villain of Quantumania? And now finally he's here in the very, very tail end of probably one of the least watched MCU TV shows.
Yeah.
Uh, Odd way to introduce Mephisto, but I guess a way to get eyeballs on him. Or on the show, I should say. Dan Gvozden, can you talk a little bit about what your connotations of Mephisto are?
Sure. Well, okay. Mephisto is like a major villain in the Marvel Comics universe. He often shows up as a villain for like the Avengers. He he's not literally the devil in the Marvel universe. There is a Lucifer as well, but he might as well be. He rules over hell, which is different than the Norse hell. But there are many different versions of hell in the Marvel universe. But Mephisto is, like what you want to say, like old Scratchy or whatever you want to call him. He is the guy that sits on a throne with a pitchfork and flames and collects souls, from people in the Marvel universe, and is always seeking greater power amongst the gods and things like that. I liked the joke here where like she calls him Dormammu and he just laughs about it, like, oh, like that guy, he's nothing compared to me. And that is, I mean, I don't mean to discount Dormammu, even in the comics.
I will not stand for Dormammu slander on the podcast, Dan. So
I mean, I like the Dormammu of the comics, so like, and I like him in the MCU. He gets gets less screen time now than maybe even this Mephisto character, but he is a sort of like a power grade above most of the villains, if not all of the villains that we've seen. In that he's sort of a force of nature, and he often shows up to make these kind of deals. I think his most famous one of recent is probably the most controversial one, in that in Spider-Man comics, Aunt May had died, and Peter traded his marriage to Mephisto in order to resurrect Aunt May, and
his
so
marriage to Mephisto?
to Mary Jane.
Oh, to Mary Jane. Okay,
yeah, yeah. So he gives up their history and marriage to Mephisto in order to bring back Aunt May, and it's been that way for, I guess, almost 20 years now, or maybe 20 years now, and remains probably the most controversial story in Marvel history. Yeah, I mean, he is the guy you'd think of as, I think, presented here. And honestly, like, I would never have cast Sacha Baron Cohen as him, but I think it's perfect casting and really exciting. And I wish I had thought of it. There's a sort of kind of comedic element to him, like this kind of cocky arrogance and trickster nature that I think people just associate with Sacha Baron Cohen. And I just think it was a really clever casting here. And it sounds like you were frustrated with the sort of short appearance of the character in this episode, but I actually found it like really effective and a great way of kind of like taking the sort of thematic elements of the show, where like both Parker and Riri early on said, I'm willing to do anything to get my goals. There's no line I wouldn't cross. And he becomes the sort of literal version of that. And I don't feel like, I mean, I know more about him from the comics, but like, I'm able to separate the two. I didn't feel like I needed to know more about him here. It's all very coded in like, I mean, there's the bar, which is what, like Desperitos, and it's like, oh, okay, like it's the place you go when you're desperate, and the door shows up for you to bring you in there and make the deal with the devil over, like, while you're cutting up slices of the pie, and it's got that sort of mobster, mafioso, like coding, which was very much tied to the Hood in the comics. He was very much treated like a Vito Corleone character. And so like all of that really worked for me in this final episode of the show.
I had no issue with Sacha Baron Cohen in the casting. Like, I thought solid casting, great performance. I personally, as David Chen, am interested in stories like this of people making deals with the devil and talking with the devil, and how that looks like and what the devil actually wants. The Book of Job in the Bible is like
Sure.
a really good example of that, and obviously there's many stories in popular culture about it as well. So I didn't really have an issue with the concept, but to me, it felt like just yet another idea that we're going to give pretty short shrift to. It's also the second, possibly second MCU show where the finale episode is a brand new villain character getting introduced and then explaining a bunch of stuff to the protagonist via exposition, like somewhat clunky exposition as they sit across the table from each other. Like, the other example being Loki season 1. right? That comes up where like, hey, Kang's gonna show up. Remember Kang? Remember that when that was a thing? And we're just gonna give this huge, massive info dump. Not as bad here because it's only like an 8-minute scene. It's not like a 30-minute scene or whatever. But it just felt to me like, oh, we've kind of seen this thing before. Now, I will say that what is cool and shocking is that they made the protagonist make the morally compromised choice, which I think
Yeah.
is really interesting,
Yeah.
right? They Riri decides, and it's the way they do it is kind of cool, where they're intercutting it with stuff that's happened later on. Like I actually had to rewind, and I was like, did I miss something? But no, what they do is they cut in footage from theoretically the future of Riri, and you see her interacting with so I guess he actually brought Natalie back from the dead, right? Like
Correct. Yes. And
that's
it's meant to
the
make
choice
you
he made.
think that it's possibly the AI, right? And Riri is testing it too. She says, like run diagnostics just to make sure that she's not the
Yeah,
AI.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's a cool and bold concept to have the protagonist make the choice that we all know is bad, but also we've been watching Riri make terrible decisions the whole show. And for me, I'm kind of like, okay, what was learned here? What was she joins Anthony Ramos's team. Everyone knows this is a terrible idea. Like if you're watching
Yeah.
the show, you know this is a bad idea, right? And there's no doubt that this will end poorly, so there's no tension there at all. Uh, and then for her to then also choose the bad choice with Mephisto just felt kind of like, what was the point of all, like what did Riri learn through this really? Nothing,
I,
you know.
I do think there is something learned.
Okay, tell me.
I think it's nuanced, but I do think there is something learned, right? I think for most of the show,
Don't do
Riri.
it. Don't you have an AI recreation of your dead friend? Bring back the real thing. That's kind of the lesson, right?
No, I think it's even more specific than that. So like throughout the show, we've seen Riri acting like really selfishly, right?
Yes.
All those choices were like really selfish choices,
Yes.
and they make that very clear, like to point out that like and as such, like Riri and Parker are meant to be mirrors of each other. Like they're making these selfish choices
Right.
along the way, and Parker just happens to be making those selfish choices with the literal devil, and Riri is making them like kind of like on her own terms within these institutions that like keep rejecting her because they know they discover who she is along the way, right? Like MIT discovers, hey, actually, you're not like trying to help our institution or like get a degree. You're just here to kind of like bum off of our resources, so to speak, right? For your own personal project. And even with the gang that she joins, they eventually find out, oh, she doesn't really want to be a part of our family. She's just here to take what she wants and kind of move on, even if that family is dysfunctional and being manipulated by Parker and the devil and all of that stuff. But in the final moment with Mephisto, before she shakes his hand, she makes certain, she says, um, I want to be clear, you are only interested in me and no one else.
It's just me that you want, right? Nobody else.
So the choice that she's making is that she's still pursuing the same thing, but she is foregoing herself in that process, right? I am willing to sacrifice myself. I know I'm making a deal with a bad guy. I've watched what it just did to this other guy, but it's still worth it to me in order to like bring back the people that I love, right? And like heal that part of it. And so like I think it's, and maybe it didn't work or wasn't fully communicated, but for me it worked because it felt like, yes, we're dealing with shades of gray here. She's still probably doing something bad that's going to hurt other people around her, but it's, I think it's a more noble choice than the one that she's been making the whole show, which is sort of like pursuit of her own goals for herself to feel better and heal her trauma. Whereas this final one is not about her. She's willing to let herself go in order to make the world better, so to speak.
And how is she making the world better? Like by bringing her friend back from the dead? Is that's what you're saying? It's like
Correct. Yeah.
she's undoing something that has gone wrong.
Correct. Yes.
That's interesting because I read it the complete opposite way, right? Where the whole show has been about her kind of, yes, she's been avoiding the trauma of the past, and that's something that's addressed. Like you can't just forget it all. You need to like remember, otherwise you'll forget the good things as well. But I think it's really hard for me to read her hanging on to her AI friend as anything but unhealthy. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it feels like a very unhealthy fixation she has with her AI friend. So that when she like brings her back from the dead, it feels like, oh, she has succumbed to this unhealthy impulse. That's how I read it. But maybe you're right that the show is not intending it. Maybe the show is saying actually she's righting a wrong. She's undoing an injustice by bringing back her friend. I don't know though. I mean, she's literally making a deal with the devil. I think we're supposed to
Sure.
know it
Sure.
has some huge caveats attached. It has some
But
huge.
I think
Yeah.
both things can be true. Like
Mhm.
she sees this as the only way to get what she wants, right? But like, why else have the line like, "I want to make sure this is only to do with me and no one else," right? Like I think she's entering into that consciously aware of what she personally stands to lose. Now, maybe she thinks she can get the better hand of the devil, which I think is probably true of anyone in fiction that makes a deal with the devil.
Yeah.
Um, so like I don't know. I think like both things can be true, which again kind of gets back to my frustration with the filmmaking of it. Like, because like you're right, the show ends with like that vein creeping across her
Yeah.
arm, and you're not supposed to be like,
You're
oh,
not supposed to
like
sell it. You're not supposed to
yes,
celebrate. Oh, she
yeah,
made the right decision.
right,
You're
right.
not supposed to. Right. So
Yeah. So like it's a little bit of both, but like I still think it wants you to see that there is progress there for her, even if it's not the mountain of progress that we would hope. Right. Like she's still hell bent on bringing back Natalie, and it is mixed because like the implication of Natalie going away in the first place, my read was that it's supposed to be like a metaphorical stand-in for her healing some of her trauma enough that when she
absolutely.
tries
Yes.
to recreate her brain, nothing comes out of it, right? Um, and yet she's still kind of clinging to that trauma, so therefore it's not healed.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a mishmash all over the place. I just kind of wanted to present the alternative because I think it is trying to do both things.
Interesting. Interesting. All right, then. Couple of dangling plot threads to discuss here. But before we do that, why don't you let people know where they can find more of your work on the internet this week?
Yeah, sure. Well, of course, I'm writing for you, David, Decoding TV, and I'll have my recap and review of these 3 episodes in your newsletter. But I also run the Amazing Spider Talk podcast. It's all a podcast all about Spider-Man, Spider-Man comics, TV, movies. We discuss each new comic that comes out every 2 weeks. And we take a look back at the history of the character as we've been working through his history. We're in the early 90s right now and just discussing, all the things you may want to know about how this major pop culture icon was formed. And we have over 200 interviews with different creators who've worked on Spider-Man projects over the years. So if you're someone that likes the character of Spider-Man or wants to know more or wants to find an entry point into that world, come check us out. It's Amazing Spider Talk podcast at amazingspidertalk.com.
And again, be sure to subscribe to the decodingtv.com newsletter. It's free, and you'll get recaps and reviews like Dan Gvozden's for Ironheart. We also got some reviews of Squid Game going on, and later this summer we'll be covering shows like Alien Earth as well. So be sure to subscribe. It's free, and you'll get that stuff delivered straight to your inbox. All right, a few other dangling threads to discuss, Dan Gvozden. There is a post-credit scene in the show
Mm-hmm.
where Parker goes to Stanton's shop, right, and meets up with Zelma a little bit and says like he's looking for the real magic. So we'll see what goes on there. I didn't know if you had anything to say about that. I mean, as far as I understand, Dan, at the end of the show, Parker still has majority ownership, whatever the hell that means, of all these companies. So he's still extremely wealthy. I think none of that makes any goddamn sense in the realm of the American contract / justice system. But like, whatever, taking it for as a given, he still has a lot of power at the end of the show. So him potentially teaming up with Zelda could be interesting. I don't know if you had any reaction to that, Dan.
I mean, I don't know how much of that he maintained, but he also seems to have gotten the better deal of the devil, which seems odd, right? Like if the worst of it is he's like filthy rich, but he also has this strange like vein-like tattoos, like it seems like you got out of it like pretty clean, like I was expecting a sort of drag me to hell ending for this guy,
right? There should have been.
Yeah.
Again, it's this whole thing with like there not being any really negative consequences to the magic throughout this whole show.
Yeah, sure. And it would be really disappointing if like he didn't meet that sort of like end he probably should have, if it's just to have this post-credit scene where he goes to Zelma's. And he says he's seeking out like something supreme, which like in my mind, I think it's obviously a nod to the Sorcerer Supreme. This to me obviously seems like a setup for that Strange Academy show that I mentioned earlier that's been stalled out. And this, I'm sure they shot this a long time before the like Marvel Television overhaul was kind of like announced, where they were stalling a bunch of projects. So whether we'll ever see that again, who's to say? But that show hasn't been canceled, so maybe they're reworking it and will ultimately go in it. And in the comics, the Strange Academy is like a Doctor Strange establishes his own school, which I guess you could kind of see in like Kamar-Taj in the first Doctor Strange. But it's like a proper school where all of these younger like wizards and witches and people associated with magic, including the child of Dormammu, go to be trained. And it's been a sort of like kind of cult popular, series in the Marvel comics for the past couple of years.
I think the last we heard of it was in February of 2025 that Marvel had paused development on several TV shows, including Strange Academy, Terror Inc., and Nova. So the whole show, Ironheart, has been this very odd artifact of a different era of the Marvel streaming universe, right? Where you can imagine, this is going to plug right into Strange Academy, which is coming right up after this show.
Yeah.
And then of course, like none of that. And I mean, even just the release of Ironheart, which has come, when did Black Panther 2 come out? Wasn't it
2023, I think.
2022. 2022. So it's been like almost 3 years since Black Panther 2. It's like, you can imagine a world where Black Panther 2 was originally supposed to have Chadwick Boseman in it, and then they had to change that, and then it got delayed, and then this got delayed, and so it's just, we're just now just seeing kind of the remnants of this Phase 5. By the way, I think this is supposed to be the concluding component of Phase 5. Just these remaining components just kind of burped out into the world rather unceremoniously, with connections to shows that may or may not actually happen.
And I think Marvel like wants it that way in some way. Like I think they're saying like this is the end of Phase 5, if only because they want to close the door on this and like make the suggestion that like with Fantastic Four they're birthing their next phase where they're going to regain dominance, over the market.
I do agree with you that this might be, the end of the show might mark the occasion of, hey, we're closing the book on all that mess and we are starting fresh with Fantastic Four. First steps. It's going to be a whole new. It's going to lead into Avengers Doomsday. It's going to be a whole new era for the MCU. That seems a little bit exciting.
All you need is like a scene in the next inevitable Deadpool movie where he's just going through and cutting the heads off of all of the dangling threads, and no one will ever bother asking about it again.
Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.